Hey there, and welcome to the Eye on College Basketball podcast. I'm not Gary Parrish, and that's not Matt Norlander. I'm Gabe Ibrahim, that's Megan Gauer. We are from Her Hoop Stats, invading the podcast space here on Eye on College Basketball to talk about the women's game and get you guys set for that season, which also kicks off on November 7th. Fast approaching, very fast approaching season. So just shouts to Gary, shouts to Matt, shouts to Natter for giving us this opportunity to talk to you guys. And, you know, we don't really talk about Leaky Black so much on this podcast, but we may talk a little Colo Bad Bear from Montana State, 6th in the conference in PER. I don't know if you knew that about Colo Bad Bear, but she's a good player. I did all of that. I did all of that to make that rhyme. So, Megan, catch us up. What happened between the time we did our tournament preview podcast here to now? What are we looking at?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing that happened is South Carolina won their second national championship. Aaliyah Boston won a Player of the Year award and was a huge part of that national championship. We're definitely going to talk some more about her later, but I feel like that's the biggest thing that we've got to cover.
Well, you know, UConn made it back.
Yes,
after I think I said some wild things on the last podcast, and I may have picked them to lose in like the Sweet 16 or something.
You did.
That was wrong. UConn made it to the Final Four like they always do. Stanford made it back, lost to UConn. Louisville made it there and lost to South Carolina. A lot of great games in the tournament. Sets up for a really nice, complete season. And if you're interested in learning more about this game, you should come over to Her Hoop Stats. We are a stat site. It's about $20 a month. It is actually exactly $20 a month, and you get pretty much every stat you could want from the women's game, everything broken down by percentiles. You'll see green and you'll know, hey, that's a good stat. You see red, you know that's a bad stat. So easy to understand the women's game if you want to dive more into it. I think it's a great resource, and so is the Big 12 and the Connecticut Sun because we make content for them. So come on over if you're down to learn a little bit more. But let's get into it. Let's preview this season and get everyone ready for the top part of the year. Obviously, a lot of the fun of college basketball is down ballot, down in the mid-majors where we make a lot of noise with our Becky Hammon Award. But we'll start at the top. And Megan, here's my question. Will South Carolina go all the way again?
I think they're the clear favorites, but I do think that maybe the top is a little bit more messy than people are kind of making it out to be. I think if you talk to a lot of people in the women's basketball space right now, it's like South Carolina are runaway favorites. And that's definitely somewhat true. But I think they still have some questions, and I think that's the piece that people are maybe missing there is, well, this is a lot of the same South Carolina team as last year. You still have Aaliyah Boston, your National Player of the Year. You still have a lot of the same key pieces. They did lose Destiny Henderson, who was their point guard, and I think kind of the piece that really put them over the edge to win that national championship last year. She really stepped up in March, gave them an offensive weapon when they needed it, and kind of was a part of making that championship happen. And replacing that isn't going to be maybe as easy as it looks. So I think that's kind of the big question for the South Carolina team. Still picking them to go all the way, but I think there's a question there.
It's just they were so good last year. They went wire to wire number one for the first time, like first school to do it since UConn in 2017, 2018, a team you're very familiar with. And it kind of, and I think because women's basketball has been so dominated by certain dynasty, certain players, right? That's the Brianna Stewart UConn. There's the Maya Moore UConn. There's the Diana Taurasi. There's a lot of UConn. There's Brittany Griner's Baylor. There's so many teams that have had stars that win so championships after championships that I feel like that's why I'm so like Aaliyah Boston's back. They returned 73% of their total points, 82% of their rebounds from last year. They did, like you mentioned, they lose Destiny Henderson, but they bring in Kiara Fletcher from Georgia Tech, who can run the point. She's not the same player because Destiny Henderson is already a good WNBA player, but maybe Fletcher can make up for a little bit of that loss. And then the other people they lost probably won't hurt them this year. They may hurt them down the road. They lost Sanaya Rivers, who was one of their top recruits, and she went to NC State, so that may hurt them down the road. But I think this year they're pretty much set to do what they did last year. But the point guard thing does scare me because if you recall last year, we came into the year kind of thinking Stanford would be the team that repeats, right? Because they had pretty much everyone back except the point guard. and they struggled mightily with that. Do you think is that your worry with South Carolina, is that they're not going to be able to figure out enough offense because they don't have the point guard?
Yeah, that's my biggest concern. I think that's just such a critical position on the floor, and it's really going to set the tone for your offense. And until we've seen the answer there, I do have a little bit of concerns. I think also Kiera Fletcher, the kind of obvious solution at that spot, is coming off an injury. So it sounds like South Carolina is going to go with Zia Cook in that position, which I think is a very different role for Zia Cook. And if she can adapt to it, and she very well might be able to, that can be successful, but I think we're going to need to see it first.
Yeah, I mean, Cook's one of the most talented players in the country. I actually we wrote on the Her Hoop Stats newsletter, which is free, and the podcast is free. Actually, we forgot to mention our own podcast, which we do over there. So if you want to hang out, you'll find us. You'll find us. We're not worried about it. But what we were talking about in our newsletter article, our preview with all the podcast hosts, was some players that we're really excited to see, some WNBA draft prospects that we're really excited to see. And I said Zia Cook because she really struggled last year with her shooting. Her shooting fell off a cliff. Her three-point shooting was, just very off. And it felt like every time I watched her, at least, it was like those shots were just rimming out or just missing. And it felt like, you really wanted just a shot to go in, regardless of whether you liked South Carolina, just because it was good basketball. So I think I don't see her as a point guard long-term. I think they're going to need Fletcher to play. I think they're going to need some players that are maybe unexpected. They're going to unexpectedly step up into that point guard role, because it's going to be kind of a point guard by committee. To get, really all you need to do is get the ball into Aaliyah Boston. If you get the ball into Aaliyah Boston, she's probably going to score, because she is the best player in the country. So whoever can do that most effectively, and it might be Zia Cook because they've played together for 3 years now, then it'll be fine. But if they can't get the ball into Aaliyah Boston, and they did struggle with that last year as defenses kind of shrunk down and loaded up, it kind of felt a little old school, honestly, of defenses versus the South Carolina offense, because they have two players that are, monsters in the paint. They have not only Aaliyah Boston, the best player in the country, but 6'7" Carmela Cardoso. So it's hard to get down in the paint against South Carolina, and it feels very old school how defenses react. But I'm with you. I'm a little concerned. Let's rate our concern level. Give me a 1 to 10 rating.
It's like a 3. They still just have so much talent. I know.
We're so concerned.
Complaining about this one thing, but yeah, it's really it is a concern for sure. But this team has so much talent and so much size that I think until you're playing another team in the top 5, it's not going to matter. So it's really comes down to the nitpicking at the elite level.
I'd probably say I'm at like a 2.5, because Dawn Staley's gonna figure this out. I don't think there's by the end of the season, I think they're gonna figure it out. They may not go wire to wire. I mean, they did lose last year to Missouri in one of the weirdest games ever. Lauren Hansen hit a game winner, which, even if you're not particularly well versed in women's game, you've probably seen that highlight from last year's Missouri game. But that was just such a weird game. Missouri had 7 players. And they beat South Carolina. That was their only loss this season, and then luckily in that instance, there was no one to take that number 1 spot. So I think my concern level about them being the wire-to-wire number 1 is pretty high. I think they're probably going to drop some game in the SEC. There's a lot of good SEC teams, as we'll talk about in just a second. So I don't necessarily see them going to wire-to-wire, but I'm with you. I think they're going to be okay. Now, do you want to get into this other side of this coin? Who are the challengers to South Carolina? Okay, I'm gonna list out just I wrote out 3. I think there's some other ones, and I think fans of those teams are gonna be very mad at us. Fans of those teams are gonna be very upset that we did not talk about their team. But we'll start with Stanford. As I mentioned, they came into last year as the defending national champions. They did not get back to that game, in part because their offense kind of sputtered in that Final Four game against Uconn. Uconn had a great defense last year, so no shame in that. But they're going to need to adapt to, again, losing some key players, including Lexi Hall, who was a WNBA draft pick. They still, though, have the Pac-12 Player of the Year, Haley Jones, the Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year, Cameron Brink. You probably have heard that Steph Curry is her cousin. But they also have number 1 recruit in the nation, Lauren Betts, joining this team. Tara Vanderveer still there. So do you think they can get their offense to a point where they can win that championship?
So I feel like if we talk about the point guard concern at South Carolina, if I'm at a
Yeah.
3 there, I'm much higher on the concern radar with Stanford.
Yeah.
This is a question they never really figured out last season. That
Mm-hmm.
point guard role was just kind of in flux, kind of wire to wire last year. And I think we're looking at the same situation this year. At Media Day, actually yesterday, they had Media Day for the Pac-12. Haley Jones said that she's been playing in that spot a lot.
I was about to
I
say.
don't know how I feel about that. Haley Jones is a fantastic player. Her turnovers have been high, not in that role, so that's a little bit of a concern. And I don't know if you take away from what she can do by forcing her to be on the ball more instead of being able to play off the ball.
Well, so, all right, so basketball heads, Stanford pretty much runs the Princeton offense. It's not exactly the Princeton because no one runs like an exact pattern anymore, but there's a lot of Princeton sets in it. And I think, what you're saying, Haley Jones is one of the best back cutters in the country. She's the elite at getting her shoulders around players and getting to the rim. That being said, I do think she is a dynamic player with the ball in her hands, and I think they're just really going to have to rely on a lot more motion and a lot less of, dribbling. And that's what their offense wants to be anyways. That's what Tara Vanderveer wants to do anyways. I think Haley might be able to get that ball trending a little bit more and guide the team better from a point guard spot. I'm still with you, though. Because on defense, Haley Jones is she's like playing the 3, right? So I think, hey, look, LeBron's done it for years. He has been the point guard and the 4 on defense. Haley Jones, actually, her coach compared her to Magic Johnson. So maybe that's the vision. I just think, it's going to get a little funky with the ball handling and the spacing, and they're going to have to figure that out. But I think the big thing with Stanford is if Cameron Brink takes that next step. She took a big step last year. But she still has so many things to work on. It feels like, she's one of these players who their potential's so high that it never feels like they've like really gotten there yet. Is this the year she really takes that step up, becomes, All-American and pushes this team over the top?
I think it very well could be. And we talk about her like not doing as much as she can last year, but then you look at her numbers and they're literally better than Haley Jones. It's kind of crazy. Like she scored more points per game and had more rebounds per game than Haley Jones did last season. But yeah, I think we're just going to see Brink take another step forward. We saw a big step, I think, last year from her freshman year where she really struggled with the foul trouble. I think people still talked about that last year, but it wasn't as much of an issue. And I think we're going to see her kind of evolve even past that again this year and really get to a point where we're definitely talking about Cameron Brink as an All-American this year.
Yeah. No, her foul rate last year was pretty bad. 6.4%.
Okay,
That's
well, it wasn't as bad. It was a step forward.
it was like 7.3 in her freshman year. So she's getting better. And I think hopefully this year I can stop my jokes about how much she fouls because it is a lot. And she has to make her free throws as well. Luckily, though, I think those are 2 things that you really get better at in college because you have so much more time to work on the game. And she has had now a full off season. And that's another thing that we have to remember that, I talked a lot about when I'm covering the NBA with the Washington Wizards is that this is really the first year we've had a full off season for every basketball player in the country in a long time, in 3 years, 2 years. So all these players are going to grow substantially in the off season this year, more so than they have in the past. So yeah, maybe that pushes Cameron Brink to the next level. Maybe Lauren Betts comes in and is, a world beater. They still have a lot of great players down the list. Fran Belibi, dunker, as you guys probably have seen. Ashton Prechtel, shooter, as you may have seen during the 2021 tournament. So this team's really good. Let's do a percentage chance here. If they played today on a neutral court against South Carolina,
today
what percentage?
On a neutral court, it's probably like a 40-60. Like I don't think I'm that far. Like because I think it's it's so early. Both teams have issues. It's gonna be close. And we're gonna get that game actually in a couple of weeks. Not on a neutral court in California, but we do get that game in a couple of weeks.
That is so November 20th, right?
Yes. So that's exciting to look forward to.
That's the game of the year. Last year was the game of the year. It was in South Carolina. This one will be in Stanford. It's going to be awesome. Last year's game was electric. South Carolina had a huge comeback. If Stanford wins this game, because I think last year when South Carolina beat Stanford, they really kind of, the key turned over and seemed like they were really, on their way to being that dominant team that we ended up seeing. Stanford can kind of flip the script on them early in the season. And that's why we love non-conference basketball, folks. Can't wait. I love the team schedule, really hard non-conference schedules. Well, actually, as for my teams, I hope we schedule no one. I hope we schedule no one in November. Schedule the worst teams possible, and then we'll be okay. But everyone else, hard schedules. Shouts to UConn for doing that. And I promise we're getting to UConn. And I know there's some anxious UConn fans already writing tweets. We're gonna talk about you. I promise we're gonna talk about you. Do you want to talk about Tennessee or Louisville?
Let's start with Tennessee, because I think this is a team that people probably recognize in the women's basketball space. It's been a little bit. Yes. They haven't been to the Final Four since 2008, so it's been a while, but a team that at least has the potential and is currently ranked like they're going to be part of that national kind of contender picture again this year for the first time in a while.
Yeah, and it might pain some folks to hear this, but Tennessee is back, like kind of all around. They're the men's team, as everyone listening to this podcast probably knows, won the SEC tournament last year. The football team is like number 3 in the country. That may not last. So if you're listening to this podcast in the future, at one point Tennessee was number 3 in the country. So they're back. Tennessee is back. And I think Kelly Harper, who was one of Pat Summitt's favorite players, she wrote about her in her book as one of her favorite players. She was Kelly Jolly when she was at Tennessee as a point guard. She now has a chance to kind of, bring this team back up to where Pat had it. And I think she's doing a good job. That being said, I'm not that sold on this Tennessee team being one of the elite teams. I think we have to see it a little bit more. They lose Ray Burrell, who was a big scorer for them. But they still have Jordan Horston. They still have Tamara Key. Those two players are awesome. I think their defense is going to be among the nation's best. I don't remember what they were in the 10th in defensive rating last year. I think that's probably going to be better this year. Yeah. But I don't know. I just don't know how much offensive talent they have to compete with those great defenses, namely South Carolina.
Yeah, I think the thing that Tennessee has done in that department is really won the transfer portal in the women's game this year. I think they probably, it's fair to say, had the best pickup of every team in women's basketball, or close to it, in the transfer portal. And they've added some people that really can score the basketball, which is exactly what last year's teams need. They've added Rukia Jackson out of Mississippi State, player that was averaging 20 points per game last season before getting injured. They've added Jasmine Franklin out of Missouri State, a really, really good mid-major program that averaged 15 points a game before going down with an injury last season. Added Minnesota's point guard, so they've got a true point guard solution as well, something that we haven't said about the first two teams, so that's a good thing to have. So I do think this team has the potential. It might take a little bit because it's a lot of new pieces that you're relying on the offensive end. Yeah. But once it all comes together, a team that has the potential to have it going on offense and then with that elite defense can compete at that level.
Yeah, Tamara Key at 6'6" can hold down the defense. I mean, they keep her in the paint. They do a really cool job of actually keeping her in the paint and making sure that she's close to the basket on pretty much any action. They're really, really aggressive outside, and their great defense is really good. However, I do think, and maybe this relies a little bit on Rukia Jackson as well, but I think Jordan Horston kind of has to be the star of this team. She's the one who has all the familiarity. I think you come. Even though Rukia Jackson's a very good basketball player, you come into someone else's team, they're the leader. So I think Horston's still a leader. The team's going to take their cues from her. I think she plays really great defense. She just needs to be a little bit more efficient offensively. And obviously, like I just said with Cameron Brink, lots of opportunities to get better. And I think she'll get there. I just don't know if she's going to reach that superstar level where she's an All-American, right? Because then if we're talking about who has the superstars, and that's who wins in basketball for the most part, as Kelsey Plum on my shirt can tell you from her WNBA championship run with the Las Vegas Aces. If you have the superstars, you have a great chance of winning. So Tennessee needs one of those players to be an elite superstar at the All-American level to compete with the teams that have Aaliyah Boston, Haley Jones, Cameron Brink, Haley Van Lith, we'll talk about in just a second. Those players who should be at the top need to be at the top, and we'll see about Tennessee. But let's give them a chance rating. Playing today.
Today, it's got to be lower than Stanford because I think they've got to take some time to join. You're making me do a lot of like numbers in my head on this podcast. I was not ready for. Let's see.
We are from Her Hoop Stats, Megan.
Yeah, I know. Okay, fair enough. I would give them like a 30% chance today, but I think that's going to get better over the course of the season.
I'll give them a 27% chance. I was going to go under you. I was just figuring out which number I wanted. All right. Now let's talk about Louisville. I just mentioned Haley Van Lith. They got to the Final Four last year. They, were put down by South Carolina convincingly, but they actually had the best performance on the offensive glass against South Carolina in the NCAA tournament. And I think that's kind of where you need to be good in order to beat a team like South Carolina, is just trying to patrol the paint as much as possible. Actually, we didn't mention this, but South Carolina last year, I think they did throw up shots just to get offensive rebounds pretty often. It was just whenever Aaliyah Boston had a position, they just threw up a shot and she would get the offensive rebound. Louisville has the size to match that kind of. Not with Haley Van Lith. Haley Van Lith's very small guard, but she is 6'11" in her mind, right? She is one of these players who has just so much swag, so much confidence, and she led this team to the Final Four. Last year, they did lose Emily Anxler to the WNBA draft. They also lost Chelsea Hall and Kenna Smith. Those were really important players in their backcourt. They added some players in the transfer portal. They added some freshmen. It's kind of a new feeling team, but how do you feel about Louisville's chances going into the season?
I think that I am not as high on Louisville as you are, and I think there's some bigger questions here. I think Emily Anxler was just such a big part of what this team was able to do last season in terms of their defense, their performance on the glass. Really was. I know Haley Van Lith gets a lot of the credit, but I think just as much as Van Lith was a part of this team being successful last year. And then losing Kiana Smith as well, just having that experience in the kind of point guard position in the backcourt is a hard thing to replace as well. So I think I need to see this team on the court before I'm saying they've got a chance to actually beat South Carolina. I'm not saying they can't, because Jeff Walls, fantastic coach. They probably will get there, but I'm not sold on it yet.
Yeah, I mean, I need to see Morgan Jones do a little bit more. She's a big transfer coming in from Florida State. She plays more or less the same position as Emily Anxler. Not quite as strong, but perhaps a little bit more athletic on the outside, so they may have a little bit more explosion this year. But I'm with you. I still need to see how good Morgan Jones can be in that role and how they make up for all the offensive rebounding. I think they have the size. They have some really good senior players that they're relying on, Olivia Cochran, Liz Dixon. They brought in a Utah Valley transfer who should be really important for them at 6'5", and I'm forgetting her name, and I'm very sorry. I'm going to look it up right now as I continue talking. Josie Williams. Sorry. There we go. She should be big for them, and then they have the pieces, but it needs to coalesce first. So I think let's just rate them out of the teams we've talked about. So we rank Stanford at 1, Tennessee 2, guessing Louisville's 3.
Yeah.
Okay, Louisville's 3. Now, can we talk about a wild card team? I didn't put this on the show sheet, and I forgot about that. I forgot to put them. Vic Schaefer's Texas Longhorns. Yes. Vic Schaefer's Texas Longhorns, led by Rory Harmon. This team got to the Elite Eight last year, lost to Stanford, coming back this year with quite the team. They bring in Shaylee Gonzalez from BYU. She's one of the best transfers in the country, and you can find out more about transfers from small schools to big schools over on the Her Hoop Stats newsletter, thanks to Calvin Wetzel. But this team set up to be really, really good. They're really, really big, and they're really, really tough on defense. I think this is kind of the exact sort of team that I would pick to beat South Carolina.
Yeah, and I feel like maybe not a dark horse, considering I think they are ranked number 3 in the AP poll, so people are pretty high on them. But yeah, a team, their backcourt, really exciting. You mentioned Shaylee Gonzalez and Rory Harmon, also added Sonia Morris out of DePaul, so an exciting backcourt with some definite experience as well. Mm-hmm. 2 of those are grad transfers. And just, it's a Vic Schaefer team. So gritty defense, that's going to give you a shot in any game, in my opinion, because if you can keep the scoring low, you've got a better shot. So it's a young team, though, in some regards, and that Roy Harmon is only a sophomore, but she was fantastic last year. And it's got a lot of new faces, so it might take a little bit of time to gel. But I think a team that come March, we're definitely talking about as a Final Four team.
Yeah, I really like this team. I like the way they're set up. And Rory Harmon, man, she has no fear.
Yeah.
She is one of, she is, I want to see what she's listed at. That's going to be interesting. All right, she's 5'6". I don't think so. That seems a little tall for Rory Harmon, but it doesn't matter. Again, another player like Haley Van Lith plays like she's 6'11". They love to pressure. Their dribble drive offense could be a problem against South Carolina because that relies a lot on getting to the rim. Unfortunately, against South Carolina, the rim involves some very large players, as I've mentioned a couple times. So they're going to have to figure out that problem, but I think they're set up to be really good, and we'll see. Vic Schaefer is a coach that has won. So he can lead them against South Carolina at some point. I'm with you. If it was today, I wouldn't be very confident. But come March, I think we're going to be talking about them. And, just like, I just want to say, I hope everyone is healthy. A wish for health and no injuries at all this season for anyone. But I think Texas is up there. So where would you put Texas?
I think I would have them probably behind Stanford.
Yeah, me too.
Kind of right even with Tennessee, in my opinion. I feel like both of those teams, there's some questions, but I'm pretty high on both of them right now.
Yeah, I think I put Texas in front of Tennessee just because Texas has so much size. Like that idea of, hey, we just have to, they're going to try to bludgeon us inside. We're just going to have to, hit them back. I think they can do it. So, all right, we left one team out of this whole contender discussion because I wanted to talk about them separately. And it's UConn. It is the Uconn Huskies. Made the Final Four for 14 years straight. Megan, they made the Final Four all 4 years that you were there.
Yeah,
and
they also won all 4 years that I was there.
They also won national championship all 4 years Megan was there. Last year, though, the road was very bumpy. That Paige Beckers missed time. It felt like every single player on the team missed time at some point, yet they still had three WNBA players, Olivia Nelson-Ododa, Kristen Williams, who got hurt and, sending her best to her, and Avina Westbrook. All three of them were on WNBA teams this year. They lose all three of them. Paige Beckers, unfortunately, gets injured. She's out for the season, which is absolutely a bummer because if you like basketball, you should like watching her. So it's a real bummer that she is out. UConn comes in with a very new team. Like, is this the year that the streak ends?
No. I feel pretty confident saying I think what people are underestimating a little bit with this UConn team, dare I say, people are underestimating. UConn.
Oh, people are. I've heard this one.
People are not going to like that, but
I've heard this one before.
Yeah, I think people, and maybe fairly, are looking at this team and like, there's a lot of good pieces from last year, but you don't have Paige Beckers, you don't have those three seniors. But you do have AZ Fudd, and I think we did not see AZ Fudd, #1 recruit in the country last year, possibly more celebrated coming in than Paige Beckers was, which is crazy in its own right.
Yeah. She already had the Gatorade commercial before she got to
exactly. We didn't see maybe as much as AZ Fudd can do last season. She was injured for a lot of the year, was a little hesitant, I think, to start out, which kind of normal freshman problems. But a player that definitely has that, when we're talking about stars being what wins games in college basketball, has that star potential. And I like this quote from Gino, actually, from kind of the last week as they started practice.
That's Gino Ariema. We're not on our side. We're not on our side. We have to mention who they actually are. But you guys know who Gino is, I'm sure.
Yeah. He said, I would say, based on 1 week of practice, AZ's as good as anybody we've had at this point in every area of the game. Coming out of UConn, where you've had, Paige Beckers, Brianna Stewart, Maya Moore, we could keep going, but I think that's pretty high regard that he's holding her in at the moment. And I think AZ Fudd kind of stepping up and emerging this year is what's bringing this UConn team to a 15th straight Final Four.
I mean, I could
sounding like a homer.
I could see it. No, I look. They have a ton of talent. Like they bring in the best recruiting class every year. They certainly have the talent. And I don't know. I feel like that Gino quote is more about like him like softening with age. Like he's just like, oh, I love these players so much now. And I feel like he would have never said that about Sue Bird or Diana Taurasi at any point back then. But, obviously AZ is one of the best players in the country, and she can lead this team. It's just, to me, she's so good as an off-ball threat that now this year, just by default, she's going to have to be on the ball. She's going to have to figure out a way to score with the ball in her hands, how to get to the rim, and how to, or someone else does, and they can continue running AZ as this off-screen shooter who's almost unstoppable because how good she sets screens and gets out of them into shots. But I don't know where that scoring punch comes from, and I think this team, is an injury away from being really thin, really thin, and they already have some players coming off injuries, as we mentioned. So I am concerned about the regular season, but I don't know if they're going to be. I don't know if I could say they're going to be healthy in March, and I don't know. There's just so many question marks to me that I need to see first. This is the team that I need to see first the most to see how much these players have grown around AZ Fudd, because last year, again, 3 WNBA players and Paige Beckers got them to the national championship game. To get back to that point, you're going to need to replace all of that production. So, I mean, tell me how they do it with the other players not named AZ Fudd on their roster.
Yeah, well, I mean, AZ Fudd's a huge part of that because I think when you're looking at who's going to be the leading scorer when Paige Beckers is not in the picture for the year, that's a big part of it. The other big part of it is another sophomore, Caroline Ducharme, played really well for UConn in stretches last year when they were without Paige Beckers and without Kristen Williams and without a whole lot of different players that they struggled through injuries with last year. So a player I think that has a very high ceiling and is going to be a big part of it for this year as well. And then in the front court in terms of scoring, you have Dorka Juhas, an Ohio State transfer from last year, kind of really didn't get things going and fit in, I think, as well until March, and then went down with a very unfortunate wrist injury in the Elite Eight, but a player that's going to be a big piece of this team.
And she's back 100%.
Yeah, she's back. Yay. She's healthy. She's participating in everything. Right. And then the player I think is going to be a big part of this team, Aaliyah Edwards. She struggled last year. I think that's fair to say, but kind of got things going in March. Stood out, I think, especially to me in the Big East tournament, and helping kind of carry UConn on the defensive end a little bit there. And if she can kind of have that breakout year in her junior season that I think a lot of people are expecting, that's going to be a big piece of this UConn team being where I think it can be at.
They certainly have the talent, like I mentioned. They have the talent, but and we'll have to see how fast that talent can grow. And their freshmen too should be able to come in.
Fresh man now because the injury bug keeps biting at the Huskies.
Tell people about the injury because I didn't see what the actual injury was.
Yeah, she had surgery for a dislocated kneecap, basically, I think I don't remember the technical details. I'm not a doctor, but out for the season. Ice Brady, one of their top recruits for the season. So just one freshman now, Ayanna Patterson, who can dunk though. So that should be fun.
Her tape is real impressive. If you have seen just Instagram clips of her, Patterson, that could be a big part of this. I just don't. And UConn freshmen are a little different, as we saw with Paige Beckers, as we saw with AZ Fudd. But, I don't want to, I don't want to put too much on the freshman.
That's not what we're relying on, If you're
because she's the seventh player in this depth chart, eighth maybe, right? It's really thin. So I'm just concerned about that, and hopefully they stay healthy. I wouldn't be surprised though if, you mentioned, hey, all those people got going in March. That's weird. I wonder why that happened. And then they went to the national championship game. So that could happen again. I would not be surprised. But I'm saying it. I'm going to put it on. Get this on the short. UConn does not make it back to the Final Four this year. This is the year. They're not going to do it.
We will see who's right in March.
I don't want to come on this podcast next year and say it again. So this is the year. But anyway, best of health everyone on UConn, just to make sure you only have 8 players, so you guys all need to stay healthy. Let's talk about the All-Americans. That I think the list came out this week, doesn't matter. We have 6 players on this team, even though probably it should be 5. The AP All-American team. We have Leah Boston, Haley Jones, 2 players we've already talked about. Let's talk about the players that we haven't quite talked about. One of them being perhaps the most exciting player in the country, Caitlin Clark. Last year, she led the nation in points. She also led the nation in assists by like wide margins, substantial margins on both of those leads in those categories. She became the first woman to ever to average at least 27 points and 8 assists since at least 2010, because that's how far back our database goes. She became the first woman to average at least 26 points and 7 assists when she was a freshman. So her junior year, we expect even more. I mean, can we expect more from Caitlin Clark? I don't know if that's fair.
Yeah, I don't know that that's fair either, because she already does so much for this Iowa team. And I think if Iowa's going to get better, it has to be someone else that's going to make the next step forward. But yeah, I mean, just such a fun player to watch. I would love to know what her like percentage is on logo threes, because I think it's probably higher than her normal 3-point percentage. But just a really dynamic player on the offensive end, can put this team on her back, and has on many occasions, and is going to be very exciting to watch in her junior season.
Yeah, and we haven't seen her make the really deep run in the tournament. What, they made it to the Sweet 16? Did they make it to the Sweet 16 last year? They didn't, right?
They lost to Creighton at home, like the biggest upset of the tournament last year.
Shouts to that Creighton team. I forgot that's who they beat, because they then they had to play Iowa State.
And they beat them too. Yeah.
And they beat them too. Just really mean Nebraska, Iowa conflict between Creighton and those schools. But they do bring back a very good team. You know, I think McKenna Warnock's a great shooter. Kate Martin proved herself. Monica Sonano is obviously the other name on this roster, one of the best players in the Big Ten. They bring in Molly Davis from Central Michigan, who may be a starter for them. Iowa, though, I forgot their defensive rating, but it started with an 8, and it was definitely 2 numbers. So not
actually
that
started
great.
With a 9. It's even worse. It started with a 9. It is
99th. Oof. Yeah. They weren't 3-digit bad, though. Not 3-digit bad. That's a rough look. First in offense, 99th in defense. And that's kind of a recipe for getting upset in the tournament. We'll see. Maybe Caitlin Clark makes a little bit of a leap on defense. And if she does that, oh my God, what a basketball player we have on our hands. If she can really step up on defense, she's like opportunistic. You know, she's classic, like really great offensive play, like always looking for the steal. And she's not a bad team defender. She just doesn't make a huge difference on that side. If she does end up making a huge difference on that side, or they get that contribution from someone else, the team could be one of the in that category of contenders. I don't think they're there. They're behind at least Uconn. I don't know where we want to rate Uconn. I didn't ask you that question, and we're not going to go back. No, we're moving on. We're moving on in the Big East. Who do you think I'm going to mention though?
And are you going to mention Anissa Morrow? I mean, she is through All-American. Okay.
Anissa Morrow.
There's another name you could throw in there, but
yeah, I could. But Anissa Morrow, 3rd best player efficiency rating in the country as a freshman. She led the nation in rebounding at 6'1". 23 consecutive double-doubles for DePaul as a freshman. Just one of the best freshman seasons ever. And that's coming on the heels of all those great players at Uconn that I just mentioned, and a bunch of other great players around the country.
Yeah, I think she had over 30 double-doubles in total last season for DePaul. Just like an absolute machine on the glass. It's insane. And it's a lot of fun to watch. And that was, like you said, as a freshman. So we can only expect that it's going to get better this year. And she's going to have to carry a heavier load for DePaul this year, too. They graduated a lot of pieces. She was already the star of the team, but it's going to be even more the star of the team this season. So it'll be interesting to see somehow if she can improve on those numbers, which seems crazy when you already had 30 straight or 30 total double-doubles. But I do expect that her numbers will even be better this season somehow.
Oh, I mean, her usage rate was only 30.3% last year for DePaul. And as Megan said, that number's probably going up. Maybe there's some we said it about pretty much every player here. Maybe there's some ways she can answer a game in terms of, being able to find shooters and hopefully those shooters making shots. That's probably the one area of her game that really wasn't, that strong, is her passing and her vision on the court. And if she can get her assist up and turnovers down, I think, we're looking at an even better player, even if those, scoring numbers are a little lower. But yeah, I don't see it being that much different because she is going to have to do a little bit more for DePaul. And if she gets a chance in the tournament, that's going to be the player that y'all have to sit down and watch. We will send out the tweets. We'll send out the reminders. Hopefully we can do the show again right before the tournament and let you know to watch her, because she's a special basketball player.
And I think you can watch her on Fox twice this season too. I believe DePaul has 2 Fox games, so that's exciting.
Yeah. The other player in the Big East, by the way, is Maddie Segrist over at Villanova. Yeah. Tremendous basketball player. But we're all on the All-Americans right now. If you want to you want to go deeper down the trenches, folks, you can come over to the Her Hoop Stats podcast, or just let Gary, Matt, and Nada know that you guys want us back, and then we'll be back. I'm here all the time. I'm just sitting in this chair waiting to do a podcast. We'll talk about the last 2 All-Americans, Elizabeth Kitley and Ashley Jones. Both these players are WNBA draft prospects, along with Leah Boston and Haley Jones. We haven't mentioned that Leah Boston is going to be the number 1 pick next year. That's pretty much locked. Haley Jones looking like the number 2 pick, but we'll see about the rest. Elizabeth Kitley and Ashley Jones, kind of interesting players. Ashley Jones kind of fits into more of that stretch 4 model, but they both like to post up. Elizabeth Kitley's a 6'6" center over at Virginia Tech, who at Virginia Tech is my pick to win the ACC regular season crown because of all the talent they brought in the transfer portal. I think she's going to have another great season after putting up 42 points in the ACC tournament. Really impressive game that I got to see close up. So I'm really high on Elizabeth Kitley. Ashley Jones comes back for another year at Iowa State, where she's the Big 12 preseason player of the year, and has a real chance to be top 3 or 4 pick. And last year she probably would have been a top 5 or 6 pick anyways, because of her shooting. So I think both those players are shooting for draft position, and I think they'd be really, really fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, starting with Kitley, I think, like you said, Virginia Tech brought in Ashley Owusu also from Maryland, a team that's going to be very exciting in the ACC. Not really an All-American take, but just the ACC on the women's side, I think, is hands down the best conference in college basketball, men's or women's this year. There are 5 top 15 teams in the preseason poll from the ACC between Louisville, NC State, Virginia Tech, Notre Dame, and I'm blanking on the last one. Oh, North Carolina, of course. Going to be a very exciting ACC.
You didn't even mention the most exciting team in the ACC.
Yes, I'm sorry. I skipped
my Miami Hurricanes, baby.
They are not ranked in the top 15 games.
You know what? Katie Meyer's going to get that team at the top 25. Actually, I don't know. We're more of a tournament. Well, not we. I'm a very impartial journalist. Katie Meyer and the Miami Hurricanes, They got to the ACC tournament championship last year. They gave South Carolina a little bit of a scare, and that game was it was like a Dean Smith 4 corners game. It was 40-30. It was a tough watch, but Miami is good. All of those teams are good. North Carolina, all of those teams also have players that are awesome to watch, namely Olivia Miles at Notre Dame. That's another player that you want to tune in whenever she's playing. She had a triple-double in last year's tournament, and that was kind of her freshman year. She didn't play much in the year before, but I guess it wasn't. I don't remember. But Olivia Miles, player to watch. All of those teams have really good players. Elizabeth Kitley, though, I do think she's going to end up winning the Player of the Year award just because the rebounding is going to be there, the points are going to be there. She may be adding some stuff to her game. She has had some inclination to take threes, and that may stretch her a little bit more. But she also I think she said she added a sky hook. Maybe we can see that. I would love to see that. She's very tall. She should be using that shot. Ashley Jones over in Big 12 country. That we talked about Texas, but this actually Iowa State team is projected to be better. They have three players on the all Big 12 preseason team. Like I said, Jones is a shooter, but she's also she kind of plays a little backyard basketball sometimes. Of just they just toss the ball into her in the post and she goes to work. Very impressive to watch though her shooting. I mean, there's shooting. She has shooting drills on the internet on YouTube. She is knocking them down, and they are really tough shooting drills. So I think she's going to be one of those players that she's one of those players though that you don't necessarily notice until it's crunch time and she's taking all the shots because she's off the ball a little bit more. But she's definitely going to be someone who can bring Iowa State to somewhere they haven't been before.
Yeah, I think talking about Iowa State or Texas being somewhere they haven't been at least in a while. I mean, Baylor has won 12 straight. Yeah, 12 straight.
12 straight.
12 championships. I do think that this is the year that Baylor is not going to be taking home that title in the Big 12. Between Texas, Iowa State, Oklahoma, another team that's going to be in that conversation. I do think this is Baylor's year. I don't think it's UConn's year, but I do think it's Baylor's year to take a bit of a backseat.
It's not UConn's year to be bad. Okay, got it. Sorry, I was confused. But no, Baylor is really talented, but I think Iowa State just has a little bit more continuity. They have more players that we know. We'll see. I'm with you though. I think Baylor's a little bit underrated, but that conference is going to be good until Texas and Oklahoma leave, which is happening at some indefinite point in the future. Then it'll be a very different conference. But all right. Megan, do you have any other players we should mention? Any other teams? Like anything that you think someone coming into the women's game should really look out for this season?
I think my ACC take was what I was going to go with here. So
okay.
I am blanking.
There we go, ACC take. But all right, your game. I think we mentioned Olivia Miles over at Notre Dame. That would probably be one of my players to watch. I would say watch Haley Cavender too, because as I mentioned in this article that we wrote on the newsletter, yes, she's on TikTok and they make a lot of money, her and her sister, on NILs, but she's really, really good at basketball. She shot 40% from the field, 35% from three, 95% from the free throw line last year. There's really good stats at her volume. She's coming over to Miami. There's some other like Alexis Murkowski at Nebraska is going to be really fun watch. That team is going to be crazy because they're going to shoot a ton of threes. Like that is a fun team to watch if you get to flip it around the channels and see them up. And then just like some games, as we mentioned, that's Sunday, November 20th. If you want to give a day to women's basketball, that's the day. Just sit there. There's a ton of games. There's that Stanford, South Carolina game that we mentioned. Then there's the Battle for Atlantis, which is always fun because in the Bahamas and everyone's chill and relaxed. And then we have Maryland versus Baylor. There's UConn taking on NC State in that rematch of a great Elite Eight game last year. Just a ton of great games on that day. So I would say that's the day that if you're going to sit down and really get into the season. I know some people like to dip your toe into the season, and I understand that. I think basketball is a very long time. Don't need to jump in and watch 20 games at once. Maybe wait until November 20th and see where these teams are at and see how our predictions are going. I think it goes without saying we're both picking South Carolina to win championship.
Yeah, I think that goes without saying.
I just figured we should put the bow on that before we go away and we go back to the Her Hoop Stats podcast network. We have 3 podcasts a week pretty much every week. So come hang out with us. We'll talk women's hoops. And, as always, keep it locked here on Ion College Basketball. I don't think I need to tell you guys that. This is a great podcast. And I'll be listening to it this year, getting ready for the other Miami team, the Miami men's team, coached by Jim Larinaga. I'll be listening until we start losing, if we start losing. I'm sorry. I get so bad at the football team. If the basketball team starts losing, I may tune out, but we'll be over here. How's UConn's men's team looking? I don't know.
They're getting votes. I feel like I focus less on the men's team now because it's hard to watch everything. But
they haven't made 14 straight Final Fours.
No, they have not. They have not made 14 straight Final Fours. They have won 4 national championships though. So there's something there.
That's a good start. That's a good start over there for the men's program at UConn.
How many national championships does Miami have, Gabe?
Well, I mean, we're a football school. We were a football school. Now we're a basketball school. This is a basketball podcast. We are hosting basketball podcasts over on our side of the ledger at herhoopstats.com. That's a stat site. The Her Hoop Stats newsletter is on Substack, and you can find the podcast on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. You guys know how to find all that stuff. So, for Megan Gauer, I'm Gabe Ibrahim. Again, thanks to Nada for setting this all up for us and giving us this space. And we hope to see you back here to talk more women's hoops right here on the Ion College Basketball Podcast.